I stood frozen, my mind struggling to process the scene unfolding before me. A woman with an HOA badge and a smug grin was snapping metal handcuffs onto a doctor's wrist right outside my neighbor's house. I just turned the corner when the reality hit me. The man in scrubs was yelling that a critical patient inside needed urgent care. But the woman, the notorious Susan, president of our supposedly peaceful neighborhood's HOA, was too busy lecturing about trespassing and rule-breaking to listen. A few neighbors stood on the lawn, caught between intervening and fearing they'd make things worse. My pulse raced as I reached for my phone. Time seemed to halt in that surreal moment, as if we'd stumbled into a world where saving a life was less important than some trivial HOA regulation. I stepped closer, phone in hand, recording shaky footage of Susan's cold glare and the doctor's desperate pleas. He was in his early 40s, with close-cropped hair and a stethoscope hanging around his neck. He kept explaining that he'd been called for an emergency involving a bedridden patient, but Susan shrieked about unauthorized entry and parking violations. She rambled about community aesthetics, though it made no sense. My jaw clenched as she tugged the cuffs, twisting the doctor's arm. He winced, but didn't stop insisting, "There's an elderly woman inside who could die without immediate help." A crowd of neighbors gathered, drawn by the noise. Some recorded with their phones. The air felt heavy with tension. An elderly resident tried to step in, placing a shaky hand on Susan's shoulder, but Susan shoved her away, nearly knocking her over. "This is HOA business," Susan snapped. "Nobody moves until the police get here." That's when my gut screamed this wasn't just a dispute, something dangerous was unfolding. Every second mattered for that patient. My name is Ethan Carter. I'm a 36-year-old engineer specializing in home automation systems. I moved to this neighborhood 2 years ago, drawn by its tidy lawns and quiet streets. It didn't take long to learn that Susan, the HOA president, ruled with an iron grip, enforcing every minor rule with obsessive fervor. I'd heard stories of her antics finding a family for a mailbox that wasn't approved, harassing someone over a slightly overdue holiday decoration. But this, handcuffing a doctor on an emergency call, was unthinkable. I hurried to the side of the patient's daughter, trembling by the door. She knew me from community events and grabbed my arm like I was her anchor. "Mom's barely breathing," she gasped. "She's on oxygen with a heart condition. The nurse told me to call DR. Hayes immediately. He got here so fast, but that woman stopped him." Her voice broke with panic. I shot a furious glance at Susan, who was now on her phone, likely calling the police to back her warped sense of justice. There was no time to waste. In a surge of courage I didn't know I had, I demanded Susan release the cuffs. She turned her icy stare on me, her lips curling as if my request insulted her authority. I knew she thrived on control, but she was out of her depth, endangering a life. Susan didn't budge, claiming she had the right to detain an intruder. I saw DR. Hayes struggling to stay calm, repeating that he had medical supplies in his car and pointing to his hospital ID. Susan dismissed it like it was nothing. Neighbors tried reasoning with her, saying the HOA bylaws didn't justify violence. Others begged her to let the doctor help the patient. Each plea bounced off her stubborn resolve. A man named Tom, usually an HOA supporter, stepped up. "Susan, this is too far. It's a medical emergency." She glared at him, snapping, "Rules are rules." When a police cruiser arrived, we thought sanity would prevail. But Susan pounced, waving a laminated HOA rule she claimed gave her detaining powers. The young officer looked unsure, glancing at DR. Hayes, whose wrists were red from the cuffs. The patient's daughter rushed over, tearfully explaining her mom's condition. The officer's eyes darted between Susan's rant, the doctor's ID, and the anxious crowd. For a moment, it seemed he might back Susan, but then he ordered her to unlock the cuffs. She refused, spouting nonsense about community standards. Chaos erupted, raised voices, conflicting claims, and a doctor still restrained while a woman fought for her life inside. Finally, the officer used his own keys to free DR. Hayes. Susan's meltdown was unraveling in front of everyone. The moment the cuffs came off, DR. Hayes bolted to his car, grabbed his medical bag, and rushed into the house. The tension outside crackled. Neighbors turned to Susan, unsure whether to confront her or step back. Her chest heaved as she tried to justify herself, but the officer's stern look suggested she'd gone too far. An ambulance arrived, called by DR. Hayes from inside. The officer issued Susan a warning, stating she had no right to detain anyone, especially in an emergency. Susan's rage boiled over. She threatened to sue the police, the neighbors, even the doctor for defamation. A stunned silence fell. We'd all seen her overreach, but this was a new low. She stormed off, vowing to unleash the HOA's legal team. Dr. Hayes emerged, sweating, rubbing his wrists. He nodded gratefully to those who'd supported him. The patient's daughter thanked him, glaring toward where Susan had vanished. Word spread that Dr. Hayes was suing Susan for assault and wrongful detainment, seeking $2 million. The neighborhood buzzed with shock. Susan's reign might finally face a reckoning. That evening, I tried to relax at home, but the image of Dr. Hayes cuffed on the lawn haunted me. My wife, Laura, set down 2 mugs of tea and asked if I was okay. I nodded, though I wasn't sure. Susan's always been harsh, but this is monstrous, Laura said. And now a lawsuit. The HOA might collapse. I gave a faint smile. Good riddance if it does. But I worried Susan might target me for filming her. Still, I felt a spark of hope she might finally be stopped. Days later, rumors flew. Some said Susan hired a top lawyer. Others claimed the HOA's insurance wouldn't cover her actions. Susan posted notices for an emergency HOA meeting to address the misunderstanding. Dr. Hayes' legal team sent a statement outlining how Susan violated his rights and delayed critical care, potentially implicating the HOA. At the meeting, the clubhouse was packed with tense residents. Susan stood at a podium, flanked by the nervous VYC president, Claire. Susan claimed Dr. Hayes was an unregistered contractor, tapping her bylaws. Section 3.7 requires non-residents providing services to have HOA approval, she said. The crowd muttered in disbelief. I stood and said, Susan, we saw you restrain a doctor during a medical emergency. That's inexcusable. Nods rippled through the room. Susan snapped that I wasn't there when Dr. Hayes arrived, but I countered. I saw you cuff him while he begged to save a life. An older man, Mr. Thompson, pointed his cane at her. You've bullied us too long. This crosses every line. Applause broke out. Susan's confidence faltered, but she insisted the lawsuit was baseless. Claire finally spoke, her voice shaky. Susan, this could be false imprisonment or assault. Susan slammed the podium, but Claire stood firm. The meeting dissolved into chaos, with residents demanding Susan's removal. She stormed out, threatening lawsuits. Afterward, Claire thanked me for speaking up, admitting Susan had intimidated the board for years. We're discussing removing her, she said. If we don't, the lawsuit might target the HOA. Over the next week, neighbors shared stories of Susan's past harassment fines for minor landscaping choices, threats over backyard decorations. Dr. Hayes stayed quiet but was seen checking on the patient, who was stabilizing. He told me, I've seen arrogance, but never like this. News vans appeared as the story hit local media, fueled by the $2 million lawsuit. Susan distributed a newsletter claiming Dr. Hayes was aggressive and unidentified. Neighbors tore it up or mocked it on bulletin boards. One night, I woke to scraping metal. Someone slashed my tires and fled in a dark SUV. I reported it, suspecting Susan's allies, though I had no proof. It only strengthened my resolve. At a tense HOA meeting, Claire moved to remove Susan. Despite her lawyer's protests, the board voted her out. Susan vowed to fight, but her exit felt like a turning point. Signs appeared at the community entrance, claiming the HOA was under attack. Claire had them removed, but they kept reappearing. The patient's daughter, Emily, thanked me for my statement to the police. She said her mom was recovering and that she might join the lawsuit. Rumors swirled that Susan offered Dr. Hayes hush money, but he refused. One evening, a restricted number called, offering me cash to retract my statement. I refused and documented it. A sheriff's deputy served Susan court papers, and she raged behind closed doors. The lawsuit gained momentum with witness statements and video evidence. At the initial hearing, Dr. Hayes' team presented damning proof, including an invoice showing Susan bought the cuffs beforehand. The judge allowed the case to proceed, hinting at serious consequences for Susan. She stormed out, dismissing settlement offers. Months later, after depositions, Susan settled, reportedly paying a hefty sum under an NDA. She sold her house and moved away. The HOA, led by Claire, reviewed set bylaws to prevent such abuses. A community picnic brought relief, though Susan briefly tried to disrupt it, citing old rules. The neighborhood healed, galvanized by the ordeal. Dr. Hayes continued his work, and residents vowed never to let one person's ego endanger lives again. Seeing Susan's MOVing truck leave was bittersweet as self-inflicted downfall, but a lesson in standing up for what's right.